10 terrifying micro-horrors. A young boy is sleeping in his bed on a usual night. He hears footsteps outside his door and peeks out of his eyes to see what is happening. His door swings open quietly to reveal a frightening man carrying the corpses of his parents. After silently propping them up on a chair, he writes something on the wall that the boy can't quite see from the blood of the dead bodies. He then climbs under the child's bed silently. The little boy is scared beyond belief. He can't see the writing on the wall, and he knows the man is under his bed. Like any child, he pretends that he slept through the whole thing and hadn't woken up yet. He laid quietly, hoping the man would just leave. However, after minutes turned into an hour, his eyes had adjusted more and more to the darkness, and he decided to make one more attempt to read the words on the wall. Through squinted eyes, he gasps as he finally makes out what the words said. "I know you're awake." Suddenly, he feels something shift underneath the bed. When I was a child, my family moved into a big old 2-floor house with empty rooms and creaking floorboards. Both my parents worked, so I was often alone when I came home from school. One early evening, when I came home, the house was still dark. I called out, "Mom!" and heard her sing-song voice say, "Yes?" from upstairs. I called her again as I climbed the stairs to see which room she was in, and again I got the same "Yes?" reply. We were decorating at the time, and I didn't know my way around the maze of rooms, but she was in one of the far ones right down the hall. I felt uneasy, but I figured that was only natural, so I rushed forward to see her, knowing that her presence would calm my fears in this new house. Just as I reached for the handle of the door to let myself into the room, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call, "Sweetie, are you home?" in a cheery voice. I jumped back, startled, and ran down the stairs towards her. But as I ran, I looked back over my shoulder once more, and I saw the door slowly open a crack. For a brief moment, I saw something strange in there. And I don't know what it was, but it was staring at me. Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch an opening act at the local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table we were sitting at, the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, gave a low, raspy giggle, and then hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause, that it was stolen, and headed home. However, when I got home, I found my phone lying on my nightstand, right where I had left it. Mommy told me never to go into the basement, but I wanted to see what was making that noise. It kind of sounded like a puppy, and I wanted to see the puppy, so I opened the basement door and tiptoed down a bit. I didn't see a puppy, but Mom found me and she yanked me out of the basement and yelled at me. Mommy never yelled at me before, and it made me sad and I cried. Then Mommy told me never to go in the basement again, and she gave me a cookie. That made me feel better, so I didn't ask her why the boy in the basement was making noises like a puppy, or why he had no hands or feet. To celebrate their first year in university, 6 friends went camping in the wilderness. After driving for several hours from the nearest town, they discovered a lagoon nestled beside a cliff ideal for diving. They set up camp in the woods nearby and spent the evening swimming in the warm, clear water. As the sun sank below the trees, one of the friends went up to the highest point on the cliff and jumped off, while the other 5 watched. Their laughter slowly subsided as they waited for him to surface. It only took half a minute for them to dive in after their friend. Struggling and sputtering among the reeds in the lagoon, they searched hopelessly for him. Finally, they disentangled themselves and came up, but they never saw their friend again. Heartbroken, they returned to the city and passed a strange and lonely year in which their only solace was the knowledge that they might one day return to the lagoon in honor of the anniversary of their friend's death. Well, a year passed and they did return to the lagoon as a memorial, but as they approached, they saw their friend standing there, head bowed. Excitedly, they called to him and began running towards him, but he didn't turn. As they got closer, they called him more and more desperately, but still to no avail. With joy, they ran towards him, but stopped dead when they saw not one, but 5 crosses on the waterside. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV. But she couldn't watch it downstairs because they didn't have cable down there. You see, the parents didn't want the children watching too much garbage on the television. So she called the parents to ask if she could watch the TV in their room. Of course the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the creepy angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or a cloth because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at that time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We don't own an angel statue." One night, while tucking my son into bed, he seemed more nervous than usual. He requested before I leave that I look under the bed for monsters because he was sure there was one down there. Deciding to humor him since it would make him feel better, I got on my hands and knees and looked under the bed. However, when I looked under, I saw another him under the bed, cowering and staring back at me while whispering, "Daddy, there's something in my bed." I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping and gathering firewood for my grandmother because it was getting dark and we needed to head back in. We were driving back on a dirt road, about 30 miles an hour, give or take, and I had this awful sensation of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window on the passenger side, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest, then completely stopped when I heard a tap, tap, tap on my window as we drove along. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was over until our truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me, do not turn away," over and over. Then I heard it again as we sped along a good 40 miles an hour, the same tap, 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 but from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or 2 passed and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and sighed. It was quiet beside the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We'll ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so that the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer in Navajo until we got to my grandmother's house. To this day, I still wonder just what I would have seen if I had turned my head. I was stuck in a bathroom in a creepy house my family was staying at. I was home alone. You had to really force the door shut to get it to close and latch. However, after doing so, I found out that the knob didn't work the latch, so I was stuck. However, shortly after, I heard the door downstairs slam shut, and I thought, thank God, my dad is home. So I called out to him, "Dad, Dad, please come help me. I'm stuck in the stupid bathroom." I heard him walking on the hardwood, through the kitchen, down the hall, and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Dad, please don't mess around. I'm locked in here. Please help me," I yelled. I immediately heard him run up the stairs and stop at the top. One more time, I exclaimed, "Please, Dad, stop messing around and help me." 4 more steps to the other side of the door. "Dad?" Suddenly, boom! The door swung open so hard it almost slammed into the wall. But it wasn't my dad standing there. In fact, there was nobody at all. A few years ago, my brother would get this call on his cell phone around 2 to 3 a.m. every night. He would answer it, and it was this hellish-sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell number after a month of this, and it stopped. However, after about a week or so, it started up again, the exact same noise at the exact same time. Finally, one day, he decided to backdial the call. It was an old man that had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times, but no messages were ever left. He decided to say screw it, ended his contract with the phone company, switched to a new one, and then got an entirely new number. You guessed it, the screaming static calls continued after a short delay. By this time, he was terrified every night, unsure why this was happening. He backdialed the number again and each time got a different person who had no idea what was going on. Having finally had enough, he decided he no longer needed to have a phone, and when he got rid of the phone, the calls stopped, of course. His phone was disconnected now. So one day, my mom asks me to listen to this weird message she got on her home phone. It was the static screaming. We showed it to my brother and he was freaking out. He backdialed the number once again, and this time it said the number was disconnected. We still don't know what it was.
Thanks for watching, and before you go, here's a special shout out to my patrons who donated $20 or more.
Mortem Guterres, Arvok Levgry, Helen Imsland, Kura, Jesse,
and Simon Laverdier Delisle. Thanks so much, you guys. If you're interested in becoming a patron and helping me to keep YouTube creepy, please feel free to check out the link in the card.